All right, welcome to another edition of the Sports Guys. Really glad you're here this week, and we're going to be talking about a topic that Rob and I have been talking about in our cars driving to work for about 5 years, and it's something that is we talk about it all the time, and we talk about it because we really love the NFL. We love to see teams succeed, and we love to see, how is it that the teams that always win do it? And one of the ways is that they find ways to balance their salary caps, and they do by their quarterbacks the right way, but also do it by their teams the right way. And so what we're going to be talking about today is QB salaries in the NFL, what they look like in 2024, and how are the teams balancing that against their salary caps, and how are they balancing that against their construction of their overall rosters. So that's the topic for today. How you doing, Robbie?
I am doing just fine, thanks.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
So again, this is a topic we talked about for a long time, and it's really evidenced by, if you look back at the data. I mean, I just looked at the last 20 Super Bowl winners and what the trends were, and almost in every case, the winning quarterback had a couple of different elements. First, they were either on a hometown discount, like Tom Brady took for his entire career. He essentially got paid about half of what he was really worth his whole career, understanding that he was giving up half his salary to make sure he had a good team around him, and that then they could pay the linemen, they could pay the pass rushers, they could pay the offensive linemen, the tight ends, and everybody else. And so either the hometown discount, or in the case of like a Russell Wilson, a situation where they've got a great team and they draft the guy last and bring him in, and he's on a rookie deal and takes his team to the Super Bowl and possibly even wins the Super Bowl. And that happened for Mahomes as well. So what are your overall thoughts about the philosophy of QB salaries, how to compensate your guy fairly, but how to make sure your team also wins?
I think this is definitely our favorite topic that we cover every morning on the way to work, because it's probably our most our favorite sport to watch. We play fantasy football, etc. The impact of how to build a team is so obvious in some ways, and it just seems like there's a desperation that happens to bad GMs that plays out in just a horrendous set of decisions that end up impacting you for a decade. Mm-hmm. It's incredible to watch. I think I'm the only one who says this, but it seems like there's a tremendous overvaluing of quarterback importance. As we started throwing the ball more, we started to value the quarterback more and more and more and more. You used to be able to win the Super Bowl with Brad Johnson and other serviceable quarterbacks who could throw when you needed to, but that wasn't the strength of your team.
Trent Dilfer,
those kind of, and guy for the Ravens, I'm blanking on his name.
Joe Flacco, yeah.
Flacco. Mm-hmm. So you could get away with it if you had a great defense and you could run the ball. You didn't have to have a star at quarterback, so you weren't going to pay him that kind of money. Mm-hmm. But as throwing became so important and they made the rules benefit the offense so much, I think the value of the quarterback started to rise dramatically, even higher than it was, which was already high. And now there's an absurdity to it, I think, where it's almost like there's no amount that they won't pay to have their starting quarterback. And all these teams are sitting around watching, with the exception of the Chiefs, watching their teams fall apart. I mean, just ask who's Josh Allen throwing to? He's got to get his $45 million, but there's just nothing left on the team. They're depleted of massive amount of talent, and it's happening across all kinds of teams. The Eagles are slipping badly because they paid Hurts. Look at what happened with the Bengals. Don't have nearly as much talent as they should around Joe Burrow. It's inevitable when you pay these quarterbacks top money that the rest of your team is going to suffer. And so what happens is these quarterbacks are getting hurt and struggling and not living up to their salaries. So then they start being thought of as not being able to play anymore, which is not the case. They're just
Right.
overpaid. They're overpaid. And the value of the quarterback position deserves to be very high. But I think putting every team that has a franchise quarterback, 1/5 of the salary goes to one player. I just think that's crazy. Like, that's not a formula for winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
That's
I agree.
why I've loved what the Niners have been doing with Brock Purdy. But it really all comes down to rookie contracts versus paying the heck out of a quarterback. There has to be some in between.
But you can agree that a quarterback who is elite, who takes a hometown discount, can also get it done. You can agree with that.
No
I
question.
think, I think there's two paths. There's two
I
paths.
think you take a quarterback who's worth 50 potentially, who could get 50 somewhere, and he takes 30. He's probably got a good shot at the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So he's going to make up more than 20 in endorsements. So it's not a bad business decision. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
You become legendary. You make up the money in endorsements. Instead of being on a bad team because there's no talent around you and you get hurt, there's no endorsements coming your way.
You
You know what I
notice that you notice Patrick Mahomes now is ranked number 9 in salary.
Right.
And of course, he is the best quarterback, and he just won his 3rd ring. And instead of some of these guys who would go out in the offseason, ask their agent to go ask the team to renegotiate, and I want to be paid the highest paid player, he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. He sees the model that Tom Brady had all those years, and he's essentially taking a hometown discount for Kansas City. That's what he's doing.
I think what I'm saying is, in other words, is once the throwing era began, because I feel like there was definitely a pivot in the NFL to throwing, which coincided with them changing a lot of the rules about going over the middle. You basically can't hit somebody who's not looking at you, and
Mhm.
you know, they protect the receivers to a point where throwing is much easier than it used to be. Basically, the quarterback value was rising, but it went beyond anything that's sensible now. That's my personal opinion. I think they're overpaying all of them. All the elite quarterbacks are overpaid, and it's hurting the rest of their teams. And that's why I wouldn't be surprised, with the exception of Patrick Mahomes. He seems to be able to make the guys around him who are really subpar players better, just good enough to get through. And he was also very fortunate this year to have that defense he had, because if they weren't able to have a bunch of really strong defenders on rookie deals, they wouldn't have been able to afford that defense. They basically just pay Chris Jones and everyone else on rookie deals. And now they're having to fire sale those guys because they want money. So their defense isn't going to be as good as it was, not even close. The question is, can they make their offense better and offset the weaker defense?
So here's the other question, though, is quarterback, you say, maybe overvalued in some ways, yes, but in some ways, the teams that haven't found their guy for so many years, let's look at the Chicago Bears. They couldn't find their guy since 1985. So you're talking about, and they've been in the NFL wilderness all that time. Well, the Commanders, our ex-team, the Redskins, Commanders, same way. They've spent 25 years looking for the guy. They thought they had him with RG3, and then he got hurt a lot. They traded away Cousins. They finally have Jaden Daniels. They finally think they have the guy. And so my question is these teams have so much trouble finding the guy that when they finally do find him, should they pay him?
This is part of finding the guy, is doing it in the right order. You have to do the team build in the right order. It starts with both trenches, both offensive and defensive lines. Then you have to have a star at corner, and you have to have a star at middle linebacker and safety. So one star at each level.
And pass rusher.
Of your defense.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely pass rush.
Mm-hmm.
You need 2-star pass rushers, to be honest. And so you build up your team that way. Offensively, you need a great offensive line. You need to get a really good wide receiver. You need a tight end. Nobody's winning the Super Bowl without a star tight end these days. And you need a nice tandem of running backs. You don't need a star back there. You need a nice group of young running backs in their prime who are on low contracts. And then you go get your quarterback. You have to put all those things in place and then get your quarterback, because your quarterback has a 4-year window. You can extend it to 5.
Well, you have the rookie deal, then you have the 5th-year
You want to
option.
extend them to 5th-year option.
5th-year option. And so that's
So-
what Tua's on. That's what Trevor's on.
You have a 5-year window at most, but really you have 4 because you're going to be panicking at 4. The problem is if you get a quarterback that's sitting all 4 years, you don't know what you really have. If you have a quarterback and you throw him in there in your first year, but the team around him isn't very good, then you have the Panthers situation where you might be beating up Bryce Young so badly that you're breaking him while trying to get pieces in place. And by the time you get it all in place, you don't really know if he's good or not because he's been so beat up. So what you have to do is what the Texans have done, what the Green Bay Packers have done,
49ers.
what the 49ers have done, which is you build the whole team and then you get your quarterback. And you get your quarterback on a rookie deal and you have a 5-year window. But you don't start the clock on the quarterback until the team is built for the most part. You might need 1 or 2 pieces here and there you can get in the draft.
Or free agency. You might pick up
get
a free
a
agent.
nice free agent like a wide receiver that's still in his prime. Somebody like a Jefferson or something, to add in and just go roof off, make a real run at the Super Bowl. But if you don't build up your team and you go get your rookie quarterback, the problem with these bad teams is they panic and they go get their rookie quarterback and then they break him because of lack of talent on the team. And they're going to be bad for decades because they just keep making the same mistake. And I feel like the Bears keep going down that same road.
Yeah, I mean, my Panthers, they got their coach fired. Actually, there are multiple coaches in a row fired and their GM fired because they did the exact opposite of what you're recommending. They literally did not have the team to support a new rookie quarterback. Not only do I think they drafted the wrong quarterback, but even if they had drafted CJ Stroud, he would have been on his butt all year, And
well, that's the problem. They didn't build up their team with those picks. If you're 1 pick away, that's when you use your first round pick and go get your quarterback. But if you are not that close, you don't have studs in both trenches and stars at each level of your defense and stars at each major position on offense, that's when you use a first round pick on a quarterback. And if you're lucky, you have a veteran quarterback in the locker room, and you don't even start your rookie for the first year. And then the clock starts. He's got 4 years left, and you can find out if he's good or not. And if he's good, if he's even decent, you're probably going to win the Super Bowl. Or
now, they now call it the Jordan Love plan. But to me, they let Jordan Love sit too long. I mean, to me, 1 year too long. He should have sat 2 years. But
they should have traded. They should have traded Rodgers when Love sat for 2 years. The ideal is to go 1 year and then give yourself 4 shots at the apple. Sometimes you have to go 2 years, which gives you 3 shots at the apple, and that's fine. That still leaves you in salary cap situation where you can afford good players. You can pay the ones that are real leaders and are always available. Availability is huge. Look at Joe Burrow. The reason he's falling in all the rankings is because he keeps getting hurt, because he's not surrounded by talent, because he costs $55 million.
All right, so what about the teams that are in the middle? Okay, so you've got like the Dallas Cowboys, okay, have been sitting there they've had a pretty good roster for a long time. They've had a lot of studs at almost every level.
They have huge problems, though.
And yet they've been letting some of their best offensive linemen go. In free agency this year, they lost their 2 best offensive linemen. And they're paying a guy $53 million who hasn't really delivered anything yet. He's 2-7 in the playoffs. So
that's not an accident.
So what about these teams that are kind of middling? They're always good. They'll always make the playoffs. And then they're always like first round exit,
The quarterback's salary is one of the huge reasons why they're middling.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of it. The other part of it is they let their offensive line get old. Their defensive line is not as good as you'd think. Like, it's wildly overrated because they have Parsons, but not much else. And their linebacking core is pitiful.
Yeah.
Their corners actually.
Their linebacking core is actually very undersized. That's why they get run on.
Diggs gets a lot of picks, but he also gets torched. So he's overrated, honestly. There's a lot of holes in that defense, and the offense isn't that great. I mean, they've got an offensive star at wide receiver, and that's kind of it.
When you
They're
look at
so,
the
they're
Eagles,
so desperate at running back, they had to go back and sign Zeke Elliott, whose best days are behind him, and he's running back one.
you mentioned the Eagles, and I don't think they're completely in the same spot as Dallas.
No.
First of all, I think the Eagles have one of the top 3 drafts this year.
Yeah.
And number 2, their offense, if you look at it, I mean, they got Saquon Barkley now. They've got Devontae Smith. They've got A.J. Brown. They have a really good tight end. I'm not sure about their coaching staff. I haven't totally made up my mind on them yet, but they have a good offensive line. They did let some defensive pieces go, so that's a bit of a concern. But they drafted a whole bunch. They got 2 really good corners in the draft. And I just feel like the Eagles, although they overpaid Hurts, there's no question about that.
Yeah.
They're not in that middling territory anymore, I don't think.
No,
I think
they're still a very good team. They just have some problems now that they need to address. I feel like last year they were pretty decent at pass rush, but they were terrible against the run. They got chomped. So they have a huge need in the middle. I think they had holes in their defense, and their offensive line's getting old.
Mhm.
And their center, who's a huge important piece, has retired now, and Lane Johnson probably going to retire soon. They're starting to have problems, and
then the 49ers have done everything right
yeah,
essentially the last 7 or 8 seasons. They've done
that's right.
everything right except for one thing. They gave up on Garoppolo because they didn't think he could get them to the promised land, right? So then they trade 2 firsts and 2 seconds for Trey Lance, which was one of the worst trades in history, you know.
They're still paying for it. I think if they had not done that one, they could be serious perennial Super Bowl every
And
year
then
for the
and then
next
they
3 years.
essentially got lucky by drafting this guy in the 7th round, Mr.
Yeah.
Irrelevant, Brock Purdy. They got lucky because he bailed them out of a really bad situation. Because they already had a really good roster, and they kept that roster together, and he allows them to keep all those stud players
Yeah.
on big contracts because he makes $800,000 a season. So
Any other team that has a normal quarterback salary is having to make really hard choices, whereas they're able to keep almost everybody and keep adding, good rookies in a few spots. So they gave up too much for Trey Lance, but they've recovered nicely. They've been drafting amazingly well. If you think about it, Mr. Irrelevant is a starting quarterback that led the NFL in every category last year. They're set up financially to do well. So a lot of teams who've been where they are in big financial trouble because now they have to pay everybody. But the Niners have money to pay everybody. So they're going to keep the core of their team together. I think they do need another pass rusher. Like they have a few needs, but it's not a lot. They don't need a lot of things to be good again.
Well, I think the AFC is still slightly better than the NFC when I look at all the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got, Mahomes, Allen. You've got the new Charger look with Jim Harbaugh now there with Justin Herbert. You have just a lot of power in the AFC. Of course, Burrow coming back off an injury. In the NFC, though, it's improving. I think you've got the Green Bay Packers were knocking on the door last year. Jordan Love has arrived. You've got the Lions, which are just no joke. Their window's open right now. They just signed Goff, a big deal. The Eagles have improved. Of course, the 49ers are not going anywhere. So
the Eagles will be better than they were last year.
Indeed. Yeah. I think there's about 5 teams in the NFC that can win it, and there's like 7 teams that can win it in the AFC because we didn't even mention Baltimore. So, we'll just see. I mean, it's going to be a really interesting year. But let's take a look at this article that I want to go over with you, get your reaction on. All right, this article is from The Athletic. It's called Exploding NFL Quarterback Salaries Explained. You can see a picture there of Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes, 2 of the top 4 quarterbacks, I'd say, in the league right now, definitely elite. Oh, yeah. And the article starts off with essentially there's 2 big contracts coming in this age of inflated quarterback salaries. The first one out of the gate is Trevor Lawrence and his contract extension, which is imminent. He's essentially in that 5th year category, taking his team to the playoffs once, has had some injury issues. And the Jaguars really fell off last year, and it was really surprising because they had a really nice start. But towards the end of the year, they couldn't beat anybody. So, do we feel like Trevor Lawrence is the guy? That's number one. And number two, do we feel like he's worth a $50+ million contract with $200 million guaranteed? What are your thoughts?
Well, if you go by my philosophy on it, I would say no, because you only can survive that if you've built your team up with enough talented hometown discount guys and rookie deals. And I don't think they've handled their team well enough to pay a quarterback $55 million or whatever.
All right.
No.
So what would you do if you were hired as the GM of the Jaguars tomorrow? What would you do? You can't just
You
let
had
him
to
go,
fix this last year,
right?
you know?
Because now you're in this situation. You're not going to let Trevor Lawrence go. He's the #1 pick, and he's good enough to have potential, right?
I don't I don't
I
know.
mean,
Now you have bad choices only. You don't have good choices.
yeah.
You're going to pay him $55 million. You're going to have to let some other really talented players go. You're going to have a bunch more rookies playing who no one's ever heard of,
And you're
and
not going to have the line you want on either side.
you're going to be disappointing. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
easy to see what's coming.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think you're right. I think they're going to have to do it. I think it's a bad choice, but they're going to have to do it because they can't let
Yeah.
this guy go. In other words, you can't just start over in the NFL. It's not that easy. It's already hard enough to find your guy. So,
Well, it's hard to admit that you're rebuilding. So if you're Jacksonville, you can fake like you're not rebuilding. Try to rebuild quietly. Pay your quarterback and operate with less money than everywhere else, and try and get really solid draft picks. But it's not perfect. It's not a perfect science. Not all your draft picks work out, you know. And
right. Well, the next quarterback up after Trevor Lawrence is Tua with your Miami Dolphins. What is your thoughts there? What is he the guy? #1, is he the long-term answer?
I
And
think his
two,
play is
is
fine.
he worth the $50+ million?
No, he's not worth the $55 million. He's just
Do they
not.
have
So
do they have the roster around him set so that it would be worth signing the guy?
I'd say yes, but they'll unset it by signing him. So like, you know, he
Yeah.
clearly was struggling when Waddle was hurting and all he could throw to was Tyreek Hill. They just doubled, tripled Hill everywhere, and Tua looked terrible in the playoffs. Miami's defense actually came up huge and made it semi-competitive. Even though they weren't great last year, they were pretty good in the playoffs. The offense, which was great all year, was pitiful in the playoffs, and it's because they were so reliant on too few weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think some of that's on Tua, that he didn't spread the ball around enough. Everything had to go through Tyreek Hill. You got Waddle, you got Barrios. You know, you've got a lot of weapons there that should have been utilized. There's more weapons there this year, so there's no excuses. I say I wouldn't pay him. I would do the 5th-year extension and
And then just franchise tag him into infinity.
franchise tag him. Yeah, keep him in that 30-some million range, and that's what's good for your team.
Yeah. No,
And
I agree with you.
I
But
know that a lot of players look down on that and say that you're not taking care of your players, so I don't want to go play there. So you start to scare off veterans, but nobody can make the case that Tua's earned $55 million a year.
I agree with that. He hasn't had enough success yet to
He's only had one
justify it.
season where he's been healthy, and he looked terrible in the playoffs.
You have Mahomes who has 3 rings and he's sitting at 43. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, well, let's
Yeah.
talk about this contract growth. How much has it really changed? So this paragraph was really interesting to me. In 2018, only 6 years ago, Aaron Rodgers' extension was the then record $33.5 million average per year. So that was what we were talking about. We're talking about $20 million less than it is today. In 2019, a year later, Russell Wilson got 35 per. In 2020, Patrick Mahomes finally got paid at $39.5 million. That's now escalated. He's around 43 per year, which is a downright bargain at this point. 2021, Josh Allen got his contract at 43. All these contracts look like bargains in today's world. It's been pretty amazing to see the escalation. One of the interesting things I thought in this article was it mentioned that the salary cap in 2018 was $177 million, whereas the current one's $255. So the salary cap has escalated so much. It's basically essentially 80 million above where it was just 6 years ago. And the other thing I didn't realize was that there's this thing called the salary floor, where teams under the collective bargaining agreement have to spend at least 89% of their salary cap. So they have to spend it essentially 225 million of the salary cap as a minimum. So as the salary cap keeps escalating and went up another 30 million this year, it's almost forcing teams to pay their quarterbacks because they have to spend a certain amount, even the low end teams.
I don't agree with that part of it, but your assessment's right. But I think they need to spread it around their team better.
Yeah.
Don't let guys leave to go get more money.
Go get the top offensive lineman, go get the top defensive lineman. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, agreed. Well, everyone would love to be in the Brock Purdy situation. I mean, that's just that doesn't come along very often. Let's be honest. So yeah, that was interesting that there's this salary floor concept. I thought that was interesting. Let's take a look at how the average contracts average per year and then percentage of salary cap. As you can see, 2018 at 33.5 and the 18.9 is the percentage of cap on average that year for all teams. And you can see that percentage of cap has continued to escalate. And now this year, 2023, 2024, your top paid quarterback is Joe Burrow at 55 million per year. And your salary cap per is 24.5. And that's with a $30 million bump. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts about this continued escalation?
I mean, it's a terrible trend because I think it'll fix itself. I don't think GMs can survive doing this. Because think about it. Not only are quarterbacks just skyrocketing in salary, but running backs are getting paid less and less. You know, there are some positions that are just getting like choked off.
Well, I can't believe what wide receivers are making. I mean, what Tyreek Hill's contract was. And a lot of these top end receivers are making 25, 30 million a year.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Brian Burns just got 30 million a year with the Giants and left my Panthers.
I think he's overpaid, but
astounding.
He's really good, but
he's really good. But $30 million for 12 sacks, I don't know.
No, I think some of these salaries are out of whack, and I think they're going to correct themselves. I don't think they stay out of whack for another. I mean, obviously here there's 3 years where it's been bad, and getting worse. It'll probably keep getting worse until enough people take a look at the Deshaun Watson trade, where it's all guaranteed and just a massive blunder.
This is another interesting stat here, the contract API versus cap percentage 20 to 24 and the amount of percentage increase. And you can see you only had one small dip in 2021, but for the most part, again, salaries and percentage of salary cap just keep going up. This past year was 7.9 increase on percentage. So it's just up, up, up. So the teams are continuing to try to balance all these salaries with their salary caps and continue to try to keep their teams competitive. It's really interesting balance they're trying to do here. So let's take a look at why the quarterback contracts keep rising. There's a bunch of reasons why. Obviously, the position, as you led in with, has been more and more valued in a passing league. Some of the other reasons is accounting magic. So some of the teams have figured out ways to front load or back load. In the case of Kirk Cousins, 4-year, $180 million deal with a $45 million per. His 2024 cap number is only $25 million. And the reason is because they backloaded his contract. So essentially the first 2 years don't hit as hard. The $25 million is only a meager 9.4% of Atlanta's cap. And that backloaded deal, of course, will hurt a lot in 26 and 27. What are your thoughts about some of this accounting magic that these guys use?
Well, like I said, these things will all correct themselves. I think some of these quarterbacks are going to demand from the very desperate GMs more guaranteed money, especially back end. If it's backloaded, you're just going to cut me in year 3 because you're going to draft somebody in year 1 or 2 to take my place. So I want my 60 million that year or 70 million or however they're doing it. So I don't know. I think it's insane. I think it's bad for football because it's making a lot of the best quarterbacks play with bad teams. I mean, Josh Allen, for instance.
Right.
He should
That's
be
right.
vying for Super Bowl, and I think his team is trending downward because of his salary.
Yeah.
And it has
Possibly.
nothing to do with how he plays. It's just a ridiculous salary. I think ultimately the Chiefs are counting on rookies to improve them. They're losing L'Jarius Sneed. They're losing several players.
Although
And
if there's
hopefully,
any quarterback who can hide all their holes, it's Patrick Mahomes. He's one of those guys.
I just
I
don't
mean,
think
last year's team was not a Super Bowl level team, I don't think.
I don't know. That defense was very good.
Yeah, it's true.
You
But
couldn't throw on them, and
on the
they
off
were
the
stout.
offense
They were stout up the middle on defense, so you couldn't run on them either. It was just really hard to play them.
on the offensive side of the ball, they really were, not anywhere what they had been before. Largely
Well,
because he was dealing with a bunch of rookies. Right?
offensively, he had terrible receivers, but at the same time, he could run around until they got open. Um, he had Kelsey, who showed up when it was needed to
Right.
really be a difference maker.
Yeah.
And his defense kept scoring low, so they didn't have to score a ton. They've lost a lot of defensive pieces this year, and
Yeah.
I think they replaced on offense more offensive players, but they're rookies. We don't know if they're going to be good.
And they had a
I don't know.
productive running back who they drafted in the 5th round, and they had Rashid Rice who came along nicely as a receiver in his rookie year. So, speaking of this backloaded deal with Kirk Cousins, one of the ways they've structured it is essentially when it gets into 26 and 27, his final 2 years, they can cut him and only take half the cap hit that they would take if they kept him on the roster. And so I don't think he realized they were doing this to him when he signed. I really don't.
I
But
think
they've,
they. I think he did. I just thought
think
that
he
he
did
thought.
because
Yeah,
it seems like they've set this up from the very beginning. Then they went ahead and took Michael Penix Jr. And you know what's going to end up happening. He's going to start in 2026, and they're going to cut Kirk Cousins to save capital. Yeah.
Sure. I think that he knew that it could happen, but I think he thought he had at least one clean year before they would draft a quarterback. And then he had at least a second year where he's a starter. And then his third year, who knows? I don't think he thought they were drafting the guy this year.
No,
I
I
think
agree
he
with
was stunned. He was stunned.
Yeah.
Because they're really accelerating him being pushed out. And he didn't see that coming. I think he thought he had at least one grace year where he was the only guy on the roster, really. And then the guys behind him were clear backups.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go draft Penix, oh my God, the clock is running now. So
another interesting example in this article is this one right here with Josh Allen signing his 6-year, $258 million extension in 2021. He still had 2 years left on his rookie deal, which that was the first time a team had not taken full advantage of the rookie contract situation. They felt like at the time that they should go ahead and extend him and lock him in for 6 years because they kind of saw what was coming. They saw the $50, $60 million years coming, and they felt like if they could lock him in at 43 mil, it would be a bargain. And they were absolutely right. 2 years later, 43 million, he's down in the 7-8 range in terms of pay. So what are your thoughts about this strategy of signing guys a little bit early if you know he's the guy?
I don't think it was good because I think they accelerated not only to be cheap and try and not pay the big contract, but they also lost a couple years in there where they should have won Super Bowls, and they had to dump some players because back then 43 million was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so a couple years ago, so they were having to not bring in some players they wanted, probably, and not pay some
Mm-hmm.
players they wanted. And they kind of missed their window because he's overpaid now. He was really overpaid 2 years ago. And so during that whole time, it's been painful for them. So they put all this weight on his shoulders, and I just don't like it. I think quarterbacks should make like 30 million. Everyone else should make 20 and down. And, I mean, 43 million now sounds like a bargain, but I think they struggled because of it.
So what do you think about some of the teams that had humongous misfires? Like, let's talk about the New York Giants with Daniel Jones signing him to 42 million per year when he hasn't done anything.
Yeah.
And they're not even sure he's the guy. And even they would
How about
admit
Cleveland?
it.
Cleveland with the worst contract in history.
That's right. 250 million guaranteed
to do nothing.
To a guy who had sat out for a year and was injury prone. And they
not just injuries, but you have no idea if he's even going to be on the team.
Right.
Like he had all these legal troubles.
So yeah, the Giants made a humongous mistake. You had Cleveland make a complete bungle, had to bring in a retired quarterback last year to take them to the playoffs. And then, what about some of the other teams that have made these types of mistakes? Or what about the Broncos? They signed Russell Wilson to a huge extension and cut him a year later, and have all this dead. They have 80 million of dead cap money.
Yeah, debacle.
Over 2 seasons.
The Bears with drafting a young quarterback first round without talent around him. So the last 2 years, Fields had nobody. So he struggled mightily and really has looked really suspect. And then instead of addressing all their position problems, they trade him for nothing and then draft with a number 1 pick another Justin Fields type player who's going to also struggle because they don't have that much talent. They've put lipstick on a pig by getting some nice receivers, but they still don't have the trenches even slightly addressed, not even a little bit. And they don't have a star corner, safety. They don't have decent running game. Their tight end, Cole Kmet, we think is good. We haven't seen that much from him. It looks like he's probably a nice pickup for them a couple of years ago, but it's just too many question marks. By the time you know whether Cole Kmet is the guy or not, he needs a new contract.
So the reason I completely agree. The reason I knew you would love this article is because, like, these next couple paragraphs here, the first one is that these huge contracts take away from positions like running back, which, you and I have always talked about how we love ground and pound and 3 yards in a cloud of dust. So you're essentially taking away tremendous dollars from running backs. You're also taking away tremendous dollars from just the average roster player. The average player makes $860,000 last year. So you're taking away almost from the entire roster by paying these guys 25% of your cap.
Yeah.
The other interesting stat was here. Only one player in the last 10 years has won a Super Bowl by taking over 14% of his cap, and that's Patrick Mahomes at 17%. So does that pretty much solidify what you've been saying all along?
Yeah, that he's an exception to the rule, and the only reason he won it last year was because of his defense.
Well, he really won it 2 years in a row.
The year before, though, their offense was better.
That's true. It's true, but I think it does show he's not just elite, but I really believe he's in a category of his own. Just the way he can create.
Well, I agree. He does special things that no one else can do. So if there's anyone who is worth the top dollars, it's him. But I would say I would pay Patrick exactly what he's paid, and everyone else well below that.
Yeah,
I think I wouldn't pay him much less than what he's being paid, because he can take a mediocre to bad offense and be proficient. And that's a special skill. I don't know another quarterback in the NFL who can do that.
Teams that take your strategy, what's going to end up happening is they're going to end up losing the guy after about year 5, 6, or 7, and that should be okay. They just go draft a new one. Because what happens is you're always going to have the sucker teams that are willing to pay those guys. You're going to have the Jets.
Well, I don't think you have to rebuild once you have it rolling. So the Eagles aren't going to have to rebuild. What's happening, what you do is you go build up your trenches. You build up one star at each level on defense. On offense, you have to get a couple nice wideouts, a great tight end, an incredible offensive line, and a nice tandem of running backs. We don't have to spend a lot of money on the running backs, but you can get nice ones. Then you go get your quarterback. You get your quarterback when he's a rookie, and maybe you need one or two more pieces on offense that you're putting in place. You put them all in place, and then your quarterback takes over in the second year. Now, at the end of his contract, you've had shots at playoffs, maybe a shot at a Super Bowl, hopefully won one. And then the question becomes, do you start to become a destination quarterback magnet for good players who are going to take a discount to come play there?
You know what? I'm not paying any of these guys if I'm the GM unless they've got me at least to the championship game. If they get me to the AFC championship game or NFC championship game, then I'll talk to their agent. You know what I mean? But if I'm Dak Prescott and I lose in the first round every year, I'm not giving him $60 million a year. I don't care who he is.
No.
And by the way, I really like Dak Prescott as a person.
He's fine. He's a
it's
nice
person. As a person.
He's a good quarterback. But he's not different.
Like this question right here, maybe teams should reconsider paying top of the market extensions for Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, or Tua. And
I agree.
It's a really good question because all these guys want to get paid in the next 24 months. And
there's two problems that have happened in these cases. Number one, well, Tua is an exception. Trevor Lawrence had nothing around him, and by the time they built up some players around him to where they're a kind of a playoff team with the defense being strong, and he's up for his big contract, so he's going to take you back down again. And then Jordan Love, you had him on the bench so long that you didn't know what you had until now he's a pretty good player, and he's only had one good year, and he's about to be up against his contract. So you can't let quarterbacks sit on the bench, but you also have to make them sit on the bench. So it's all about timing. Timing
that should have been Jordan Love's second year as a starter.
Yes.
He's really, really good, and so now they're going to have to pay him, and that's just how it is.
They're going to have to pay him before they know whether he can really take him to the promised land.
Right.
Because everyone thinks he can, but they haven't seen it, you know?
Yeah.
They played tough in the playoffs. They were a good team, but do you pay him huge money because he had one really good playoff game? You know?
So this is interesting. The last 6 Super Bowls featured a quarterback on cheap rookie deals.
Mm-hmm.
The last 6. But those rookie deal quarterbacks are 1 in 5, and only Mahomes won it out of that group. So that's really interesting that all those other guys lost.
Well, one of those is Tom Brady in Tampa, and he took a hometown discount. Well, not hometown, just discount.
Well, no, he's not. He wasn't on a rookie deal.
No, but he was on a lower than
he was on hometown discount.
So you might as well be calling that a rookie deal.
Yeah.
And Mahomes is the exception. He's won 2. So who's the other one?
Well, you had Hurts before he got paid, made it.
Yeah.
He got paid the year after that.
And they looked really strong.
And then you had Brock Purdy last year, went on a rookie deal, $800,000 a year. So, I mean, you have all these guys. The point is you can get there with a rookie contract, but again, you don't fully know whether he's the guy or not. You don't really know.
Well, I think I'd much rather take a shot with a young guy with a strong roster than a veteran quarterback with a weak roster. Because when you get to the final games, you're up against stars and incredible players.
This is interesting what he says here. The lesson of this is, as always, simply draft and keep Mahomes at all costs, which is easier said than done, right? Wouldn't every GM love to find a way?
There's only one Mahomes.
I know.
They're paying all these other guys like they're Patrick Mahomes, and they're not.
I know.
They're not. They can't do that special thing where they make everyone so much better. You know, there's a lot of good quarterbacks in the league, but they're just not worth that money.
There's some interesting discussion here about Aaron Rodgers. The Jets are really happy to see him coming back to the practice field looking like his old self. But again, we don't know. I mean, he's 2 years past his MVP year.
Tom, I told you he was going to struggle because their offensive line was weak. I didn't know he wasn't going to make it through 4 plays, was it?
Yeah. something
Was
like
it
that.
fourth place in the whole season? I knew he was
Right.
getting hurt. I just didn't think it was gonna be 4 plays in. But you know, I saw that coming. I told you that he wasn't gonna be great because their team isn't stacked enough. They had massive holes on their offensive side.
All right.
And
Well,
so paying him through the nose is just dumb.
let's take a look at all the contracts. We're going to look at kind of the top 15 or so, and you tell me if these guys are adequately paid, overpaid, underpaid. Okay. So Joe Burrow at 55 million per.
I mean, I'm gonna make this real easy for you. Everyone's overpaid on that list except for Patrick Mahomes, and he's
So,
paid properly.
so Jared Goff just got his deal. He's overpaid. Justin Herbert overpaid. Lamar Jackson overpaid. Jalen Hurts definitely overpaid. Kyler Murray is sitting at 6. Deshaun Watson, you talked about that, the worst contract ever.
I mean, the best person on this whole list is Jordan Love at 13.5.
Well, I would say it's probably instead of him, it's all the way down here.
Well, Brock Purdy.
Brock Purdy. He's
Yeah,
way
I mean,
down
yeah.
here. You
I
just have to
thought you
go.
meant that top part of the
Right here.
list.
Look at this.
Yeah,
That's pretty incredible. He's below almost all of the great backups in the league.
yeah. I mean, that's the ideal, but that's
I mean,
not realistic.
well, look at this. Caleb Williams is at 9.8. Bryce Young's at 9.4. They're making 9 times what Brock Purdy makes.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's absurd.
Kirk Cousins at 45 mil per. He's making what Mahomes makes.
Absurd. And he's had 2 fat contracts.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins has the best agent in football.
You said that anyone who plays in the league should want Kirk Cousins' agent.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
Yeah,
about
his
Josh
agent.
Allen? I don't feel like Josh Allen's overpaid. I know you do, and you think it hurts their team.
He is overpaid, but
He's
not
sitting
as
at
bad.
3.
Not as bad as some of the other ones, but I mean, yeah, he's overpaid. And he started being overpaid a couple of years ago where the team's in trouble now, like financially. They have to dump all these players and start over.
What do you do with a guy like Matt Stafford? I mean, he's 36, going on 37, sitting at 40 mil. He won a Super Bowl for your team. He played really well last year, actually.
He's one of my favorite guys up there. I mean,
He's in
not
his
worth
last
40.
year. He's in his last year of his contract. He's going to want another 2-year deal next year.
I'm not
He'll
paying
want,
him top money. I'm just
he'll
not.
want 51 or 52.
No. Nope.
And then, of course, Dak's sitting at 40, and he wants 60 next year.
Right.
So,
Dak's not worth it. Daniel Jones.
Aaron Rodgers looks like a darn bargain now at 37.
I agree. You know, his contract isn't as absurd. But I told you that it wasn't so much Aaron Rodgers' contract, it's that he was going to a team that had a massive problem with offensive line. So I knew he was going to struggle. And once he went down, it was over.
Baker made 8.5 last year, and he just re-signed for 3 years, 100 million, 50 million guaranteed. I thought that was pretty reasonable. I mean, he's a starting
Not too
quarterback.
bad.
He won his division.
He's solid, you know. Geno Smith is solid. I don't know.
Jordan's in his last year before he's going to want to renegotiate at 13.5.
He's fine at 13.5.
Yeah. They're going to probably end up paying him next year. They're going to feel like they have to. All these guys here, this whole section here, you got Sam Darnold at 10. You got Caleb Williams, Bryce Young, Jaden Daniels, all these guys sitting on rookie contracts. And then,
I'm fine with $9 million. That's fine. You know.
Yeah. And then you got Trevor Lawrence sitting at 9, ready to get paid next year.
I mean, I'd pay Trevor 35 maybe.
And what about C.J. Stroud sitting at 9?
60.
C.J. Stroud sitting at 9 million. Yeah,
there's rules on this. You can't pay Stroud for another 2 years.
that's right.
So enjoy having Stroud at 9 million.
Oh my gosh, he's the best deal right now.
No, Purdy is.
Yeah, that's true. He'll get paid next year, Purdy.
If you look at the top 20, the only guy who's paid properly is Patrick Mahomes.
So then Tua has been making just under 8 on his contracts. He's going to want to get paid next year as well.
I'm not doing it.
Yeah. So what is your backup plan?
I wouldn't be in this position. Well, first of all, he'll play this year. And then I would have drafted his replacement this year.
Mm-hmm.
So he's ready to go.
Agreed.
You know?
It'll be interesting to really see which of these guys actually earn their contracts this year.
You could draft a replacement next year and franchise tag.
What do you think of the philosophy of drafting a quarterback at least every other year and just developing them?
Absolutely. You
Get a
need
late round guy.
You need a strong quarterback room so none of these quarterbacks hold your team hostage. All these guys at the top here, all the top 20 quarterbacks are all holding their team hostage, except for Mahomes, who's actually making the guys around him better. All the other guys do that to an extent, but not to compete with how big their salary is.
I mean, you have these guys. I looked all the way down to the bottom, and guess who it was? Max Duggan, who was in the national championship game. He's with the Chargers, sitting at $800K. He makes what Brock Purdy does.
But he's a backup.
Yeah, he's a backup. And he's one of those guys that all these guys down at the bottom, except for Purdy, are all just deep backups and will probably always remain backups.
Yeah.
But, they're guys you can put on your practice squad. They're guys you can make your third quarterback. They give you depth. So, yeah, interesting. Well, your theories can be.
I don't have a problem with the bottom half of that list. The top half of that list is trash. And they need to do something about it, I think, because it's hurting the teams, putting them in bad positions of desperation and having to pay guys like Dak that aren't taking you anywhere. The evidence is there. Guys like Trevor Lawrence, where you don't know if he can go one level higher to take you any further. Tua, he's had one healthy season. You're going to start paying him $60 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
You could turn into the next Joe Burrow, just hurt all the time.
What do you think about like Derek Carr's contract sitting at 37.5? I don't know.
I mean, it's okay. It's not going to kill your team. You still have plenty of room to work with, but I don't love it, but it's okay.
Well, let's take a look at the preseason rankings. I want to get your reaction on these two. This is the first one here. This is by the We Hobby Group. They've got Mahomes, Burrow, Jackson, Allen, Herbert, Stroud, Dak, Jalen Hurts, Tua, and Brock Purdy. That's their top 10. You have any problems with those?
I think Purdy's near the top because of his supporting cast is so strong. We're talking,
I thought he was a little too low, and I don't know why Jordan Love isn't in this group. I'd put him in the top 10.
Yeah,
maybe towards 9.
Who would you pull out of this group? I'd pull Hurts out. I'd pull Dak out. I'd pull Tua out.
Yeah, I think so.
And I'd move Herbert and Allen down a little.
Do you put Burrow as number 2?
I think so, but I think he's so overpaid that he's going to be hurt all the time because he doesn't have an offensive line.
Yeah.
So.
What about Lamar? He's always I always scratch my head with him. He's such a freak talent, and I always think he has so much potential, and then he just never gets it done.
Well, I think this last year they were going to get it done, except the coaching was terrible.
That was his window,
I'm not the biggest Lamar Jackson fan.
Mm-hmm.
I think, he's overpaid a little bit, but they didn't lose because of him. They lost because they didn't run the ball.
I agree.
They were the best running team in the NFL, so they were punishing teams. And then they got to the final playoff game and stopped running the ball.
Right.
And so they put too much pressure on Lamar, and the result was what it was.
That's right. Let's look at
I don't think the Chiefs should have gone to the Super Bowl last year.
Let's look at the expanded list. This is the expanded list from NFL.com, and it's a little bit different. You'll notice some changes here. You have Josh Allen at number 2 instead. You have Burrow dropping down to 4. You have C.J. Stroud going all the way up to 5 now. They have Matthew Stafford at 6 after having his rebound season last year, and then Herbert down at 7. You have Love up in the top 10, which I think he should be. You've got Trevor Lawrence at 11. I'm not sure
Caleb
about
Williams
that.
at 12.
I know.
He's-
This is preseason.
He's never
Preseason.
taken a snap in the NFL.
I know. I thought that was
No.
crazy too.
That's insane.
Yeah. And I think
Geno Smith
Jared
and
Goff,
Jared Goff actually needs to be higher. Geno Smith is higher than Aaron Rodgers.
Geno Smith's higher than Aaron Rodgers, so is Jared Goff. I wasn't sure about that either.
Brock Purdy is at 17th.
Yeah, I just don't see that. I think he's about 9 or 10. That's where I'd put Brock Purdy. Maybe even 8.
7 or 8 in my book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Caleb Williams he's bottom 3 or 4 on this list.
Yeah, until he proves us, right? I mean, we don't know, but this is preseason.
Well,
this is just projection.
What's he surrounded by? I mean, he's got some nice receivers, yeah. But can they run the ball, and do they have offensive line protection for him?
I thought it was interesting. They had Bryce Young, my team's quarterback, down at 30, J.J. McCarthy 31, and Will Levis 32. This is all just projection. They had Baker Mayfield at 24. I think he's a little higher than that.
How can Michael Penix be on this list? He's not a starter.
But this is preseason 2024. Preseason 2024, and these are just projections on how good they think they are.
He can't be on this list. He's not a starter.
No, this isn't starters. This is how good they think they are. This is how good NFL.com.
You can't say that until he's a starter.
They think Michael Penix Jr. is the 27th best quarterback in the league, even before he's taken a snap.
Before he's taken a snap?
Yes.
That's nuts.
This is rankings, not from a standpoint of starters. This is just what they think are the best quarterbacks.
I mean, he very well could be much higher than that in about 2-3 years, but right now he's not on this list for me.
No, I agree.
He could be top 10 easily in his first 2 seasons, but not yet.
Yeah. They had Tua pretty low on this list. I was surprised about that.
Well, he looked pretty bad in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting list. I don't know. A lot of it is not quite right to me, but some of it's right. Some of it's close.
Well, any final thoughts on kind of QB salaries, the model that you laid out? I don't disagree with anything you said. I think that we've talked about this for years. We continue to see quarterbacks getting overpaid. We see teams making the same mistakes. My Panthers made a fatal mistake last year. They're going to be paying for it for a couple of years now. Yeah. I do think they've got the right coaching staff finally in place now. So I'm excited about that. And I think Canales is going to find a way to get the most out of Bryce Young. Do I think he's a deep playoff Super Bowl winning quarterback? No, I don't. But
we'll see. I think we'll see him.
But I think he'll be better this year.
They had a catastrophic flaw in trading up to go get him when they weren't ready for a quarterback yet. Their team was not baked in. I will give them a little bit of slack. I'll cut them some slack in the fact that their offensive line appeared to be strong enough and then took a big step back last year. That wasn't helpful because I do think they were trying to concentrate on the defensive side because they felt like the offensive line was good enough.
Here's the truth.
They had a big problem last year when their offensive line was underperforming.
Here's the truth. The owner hired the wrong coach and the wrong staff, and they called it an all-star coaching staff. Mm-hmm. And that coaching staff, though, wanted C.J. Stroud, and they were correct about that. Mm-hmm. And the owner fell in love with Bryce Young, and he went on multiple dinners with him, both with the staff and privately one-on-one with him and his parents. And this is where having a owner be that involved is a mistake. It's just like the Jerry Jones situation.
But let's just say
David Tepper fell in love with Bryce Young, and he rolled the dice on his franchise.
Let's just say they had taken C.J. Stroud. Would the results have been very different? No.
Not very different, but you would be sitting right now going into year 2 with a good coaching staff.
C.J. Stroud would have looked not good enough, and they would have been just as depleted all over the place, and they wouldn't have – they had no business drafting a quarterback that high. They should have traded down and gotten picks and filled all their holes And then in this huge quarterback draft, this is when you got your guy. And I would have signed like a Jimmy Garoppolo for 2 years or somebody like that to carry the ball.
They'd probably have Caleb Williams starting for the Panthers this year. It's probably what would happen.
Yeah, or Jaden Daniels or all these quarterbacks. Michael Penix would have ended up a Panther. You know, like they knew this was a huge quarterback draft, and they still couldn't help but pull the trigger and get a diminutive small quarterback in there and nothing around him. No stars, no talent, major talent around him at all. And he just struggled and looked terrible. And so if they do that, continue to do that, they're just going to break him, and then they'll call him a bust. But they're the bust, you know?
No, that's right.
When you draft a young guy who's doing the best he can and, hey, awesome, I'm a number one pick. Yeah, but you're going to a bad team that hasn't put good players around you. You're going to struggle. They're going to blame you, the quarterback.
You know what's amazing is Tepper now is paying 2 coaching staffs for many years to come. He's out like 70-something million in salary for guys who's not even coaching anymore. So you can tell all the mistakes he's made. He's essentially brought in this new crew, and I think he's finally hired the right coach. And he's done it to have them, clean up on aisle 5, come in and try to salvage this situation that he created. So, what about the Dolphins this year? What's your projection on them? And do you think Tua's going to have a big year? Do you think they can win their division? And secondly, do you think a year from now Tua's going to get paid, or do you think a year from now they're going to be cutting him loose and drafting somebody?
I'm afraid they're going to sign him to a big deal, but I don't think they should. So if you're asking me which one they're going to do, I have no idea. But I know what they should do. They should draft his replacement this coming up draft, or try and get somebody through a trade, and just try to stay healthy. Last year, the injuries on the defensive side really hurt. They got a lot of young guys on defense this year. They got younger, so that could be good, but I think the defense is a question mark. The offense, they've added weapons, so it might be one of these teams that's just got to outscore the other team. So in that way, that'll play for Tua. That'll be good for Tua trying to make the case for the big contract, because the numbers might be a little gaudy, but still might be 9-7 or whatever.
I think that they're going to franchise tag him for another year.
Yeah,
and keep working on a deal. I'm not sure he's going to like that, but I think that's what you got to do. You got to have a prove it year until he gets them to the AFC Championship game. That's when he can talk.
Yeah, they asked him to prove it last year by being healthy, and he did stay healthy all year. But he looked so bad in the playoffs that it kind of undermined any chance of them feeling like they had to sign him right now. So they bought themselves another year by the way he played. So they push it off. And if he lights it on fire this year, he's going to get paid. If he doesn't, then they can make the case that, he's only had one healthy year, hasn't looked great when it counted. They're worried about paying him, and they should be.
And I think Trevor's going to get paid too. I think Jordan Love's going to get paid too. I think all of them are going to get paid, and it doesn't mean they should. I think it's what these GMs feel like they have to do.
The good news about the Packers is they have a lot of young players that are on rookie contracts, so they won't fall apart right away.
I really like the Packers. They've got a good team.
Jacksonville will fall apart right away because they'll have to get rid of some more players and not sign others to big deals. So
I think the Packers front office, you have about 5 front offices that do it the right way. Obviously, the Texans did it the right way the last 4 years. The Packers have always done it the right way. They always draft well, and they always develop well. The 49ers do a great job. There's certain teams, certain organizations that just, Kansas City, obviously. Not only do they have the right coaching staffs, but they have the right front offices. And it'll be really interesting to watch this year.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and interesting topic. Wanted to bring this to you because Rob and I talk about it all the time, about quarterback salaries and how it affects their teams and the balance of their overall rosters and their competitiveness. And it's been an exciting year coming up. We're actually not that far now from training camp, so it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.